Expert mode might just be one of the hardest challenges ever seen in a tower defense game on Roblox. Expert mode is so insanely difficult that after 4 days of the game being released, only 100 people have beaten it. What was once one of the hardest modes in the entire Roblox TD genre had turned into an absolute joke. It was being beaten with 2 towers, 1 tower, no towers, on all the different maps, with beginner towers, and most importantly, with no challenge. All the towers that you work for in TDX are supposed to be what keeps you afloat against the challenge of expert mode. But when all you really need is a couple thousand coins and a video guide, you no longer need any of this. And so as expert mode fell from glory, so did the fun and player count of TDX. It's now March of 2025. It's time for things to change. Expert mode just got reworked, adding lots of new enemies and bosses, and making the overall mode significantly more difficult. The final boss now has over 5 times the HP that it used to, and it's been a while since I've played TDX, but I think it's time we return to see how fun this mode is now, and to see if the challenge of expert mode really is back. Alright man, enough of this. This intro was already took forever to make, so let's just get going. Now, spoiler alert, this new expert mode is harder than the old one. In order to deal with this, I was now actually going to have to use some pretty strong towers. Well, at least stronger than these used to be. And my choice for this was Farm, Scarecrow, Ghost, Railgunner, DJ, and Medic. From what I've seen, this is one of the cheaper loadouts used to beat expert mode. You could just use XWM turret and nothing else, but for a first attempt here, I think this is a pretty safe loadout to go with. I'm going to be playing this on an easy map because obviously it's now a lot harder. I need this easy map. And the one glaring thing I notice is how much greater the reward from expert mode is than all the modes. In fact, it's so much more that I really don't see a reason to play any of the other modes besides Endless. So much so to the point that I'm going to make a prediction. These other modes are also going to get reworked because there's no way this is fair. Anyways, what I'm defending the early game here with is Ghost. It is extremely cost efficient if you get one bottom path upgrade, and it allows me to get a little bit of farming going. This gets me through the first couple of waves, which really aren't that much different from how they used to be. But on wave 4, we start seeing some of these slows, which have a bunch of different resistances, although not that much, and end up taking a little more damage to kill. Now, because I had an upgraded Ghost, this wasn't a problem, and I was going to be able to continue farming. Wave 5 almost got all the way through, so I got an upgrade here for wave 6, and this was more than enough to take care of everything. Wave 7 would have an X-Soldier. This guy is designed to shoot and kill your towers. For this exact reason is why I brought Scarecrow. I placed it in front of the Ghost, and it was completely useless. The X-Soldier targets the tower with the highest HP in this scenario, so all the damage was tanked by my Ghost. This problem became even worse when on wave 8 my Ghost almost got killed. Thankfully it survived, and I went on to wave 9 and placed down a Railgunner. This was definitely going to be necessary for the exosuit zombies that came out, which basically had full resistance against bullets, so the Railgunner's laser shots were what I was going to need to take care of them. Wave 10 had enough enemies to force me to place down another Ghost and just barely defend him. And also this heavy Titan, which had a lot of HP, but thankfully the Railgunner had a lot of range to help take care of it. Wave 11 we saw some of the first flying enemies, the drones. These things started attacking my Scarecrows and killing them, but it wasn't that big of a problem because Ghosts thankfully have flight detection, so they were able to take care of the drones. Wave 12 had a spam of enemies that was pretty problematic, so much so to the point where I had to skip to place down a Ghost to defend the back. Things started looking a bit better after that, and there were even stronger flying zombies, which really still weren't a problem due to the Ghost that I had in the front and the back. Now, so far the early game is definitely a lot easier than on Experts mode release. Back then you had to play things extremely precisely to survive the early game. Here you can kind of chill, you have time to get up some decent farming, and things really aren't that bad. Now, I had to get down a lot of Ghosts here because there was some pretty strong enemies here on wave 16. Strong enough to require me to place down a Railgunner. Thankfully, it was discounted because of the DJ. I'd gotten up 2 Railgunners, which was now definitely going to be more than strong enough, and I'd continue farming periodically here and there. Wave 19 had a bunch of stealth enemies, so I had to upgrade a Railgunner to be able to see some of them. And this would include some of these jumpers, which jumped. They're a little bit scary, but if you have good stealth detection, then they're not a problem. From here, there wasn't any notable zombies. Stuff just kept generally getting stronger. A smasher would come out on wave 21, which is kind of a problem if you don't have any heals, which I did. I had medic. Other than that, it wasn't that bad, and all the other enemies weren't a problem either. The purgatory enemy is especially dangerous because it shoots and kills your towers. I placed down some scarecrows expecting to need them, but the guy just walked past and died. I'd got another DJ upgraded to top path to buff all my towers properly. Then I'd have to start working on a bunch of railgunners. And I was gonna have to do it fast because on wave 25 here there was a bounded, and this guy has a cooldown of around 20 seconds, after which he's just gonna start zooming down the map. I had to desperately get up some defense against him, so I got a railgunner on top of this crate, and just barely was able to survive thanks to a shot at the back of the map. I had to place down a ghost just to finish him off, because that was just terrifying right there. Definitely a wave to look out for. You might want stuns for this wave, which I don't have any of, but not like I need them anyways. Back at the front, things were going okay, my medics were doing their job, and I was still periodically farming here to hopefully get them up to max level. On wave 27, there was a lot of strong enemies here, so I started getting more railgunners placed down, and this was definitely a good idea. I spent a long time trying to fit a railgunner somewhere where the pole won't block it, and from there, I went to spamming top path rails at the front. The reason top path rails are so good is because they have flight detection and pierce, which was going to be really good down this straightaway. At the same time, I had to deal with predators. These things shoot and kill my towers, but again, medics are going to save the day here. The predators managed to get nothing done, and I had killed off that entire wave, and my money was starting to look absolutely amazing. But wave 30 had some other news. This wave had 3 bosses, none of which had that much HP, but they all had some very strong abilities. First boss, Phobius, had a strong shield. He could go fast and keep tanking a bunch of damage. Thankfully, nothing dealt enough damage to actually kill our stuff, or at least not do more damage than the medics could heal. And when Phobius dies, he blows up and kills your stuff. Thankfully, that only affected 2 railgunners and allowed us to start focusing on Zeus. Zeus isn't really all that dangerous. He's the easiest of the 3, so I killed him no problem. And then it was time to focus on Artemis, or Artemis, I don't know how to pronounce his name. This guy's a flying boss, which would be a huge problem if I wasn't using railgunners. This guy would do a lot of damage though, so I started spamming a crap ton of scarecrows to bait the attacks, and this worked just fine. I was able to replenish my defense, even getting some top path farms to make money off of the expensive towers nearby, and then it was back to defending. The first few waves in the 30s were tough. Some very fast flying enemies made it past, and then the Titan Chargers, which had a 75% resistance to my laser gunners, forced me to get up some ghosts in the back, which thankfully were enough when combined with the max railgunners that I had. Wave 33 had a trillion of these revived monsters, which all had 48,000 HP. This wave was going to be tough, but it was making me a ton of money. Thankfully, since the railgunners have pierce, they were able to damage multiple of these revived monsters at once and get in some pretty efficient shots. Despite that, they still pushed pretty far back, but it was all good. Wave 34 was extremely scary because of these jumpers, which had an insane amount of HP, and Wave 35 had a VX drone, which is a completely flying boss that did a lot of damage. Now, because I had a ton of scarecrows, he thankfully wasn't going to be killing any of my important towers, except for all those farms. That kinda sucks. But besides, I had more than enough damage to take care of this guy. Wave 36 was another one of those stomach-churning waves, which had some fast-flying jetpackers, which would have been a problem if I wasn't using railgunners. And Wave 37 was a tower-killing wave. Had I not had a bunch of medics, my stuff would have been gone to all these flamethrowers. I also realized that these X-Juggernauts have a 90% resistance to my railgunners, so I was going to need to get up some ghosts to get some decent DPS against that. And just as I started to think about that, Wave 38 had some other plans. It sends out way too many revived abominations, and I had to just spam railgunners as quickly as I could and use my abilities in hopes of surviving. Now look at how much stuff leaked. I literally had to get up an entire backline defense, and even that wasn't enough. I had to rely on the HP from my health farms to tank these revived abominations. That's how hard this wave is if you have no stuns. Had I brought something like Slammer or Golden Ranger, that wave would have been way more manageable, but you know, I'm trying to do this with a fairly cheap and friendly loadout here, so cut me some slack. Anyways, Wave 39 was so much better compared to that. It had X-Juggernauts, but because I had a bunch of ghosts up, we actually had some decent damage and were able to take all of them out. Wave 40 had the first big boss, the Destructor. I start getting a bunch of bottom path railgunners further back because these were going to be some really good boss damage, and I also started using stealth grenades on my stuff so that the Destructor wouldn't attack them. And I'm just gonna say, this boss was anticlimactic. This guy didn't even make it that far. He tried to kill our stuff, but the medics just fully tanked it, and I just killed him halfway through that loop. The drone was also no issue. Wave 41 was a tough spam of enemies that made me rely on my back defense to finish them off. And wave 42, oh, that's the boss. Eradicator Mark II would spawn out with 1.45 million HP and a shield. I'd immediately start spamming down scarecrows because this guy was looking to kill as much stuff as possible. And that's exactly what he did. He immediately used his miniguns and shredded through all the scarecrows that I placed. I'd go back and start worrying about defending because I was going to need to rely on these bottom path railgunners to deal with the boss. Things were looking really good until he just used an ability and healed himself all the way back up, because that's totally fair. He also spawned those heal drones behind him, which would just completely counteract all my damage that I was dealing to him, which wasn't a problem because we killed them fairly fast, but once we got him to half HP, he stunned all my stuff, spawned in a giant shield, and respawned his healing drones, which were going to be a much bigger problem this time as he started killing all of my railgunners and I had nothing to kill the drones with. Because of that, the boss almost healed himself all the way back up before I started doing any meaningful damage again. The only reason I'm surviving this whatsoever is because I'm at my placement limit of 9 medics, by the way. Anyways, I'd have to keep rebuilding the defense that was dying and placing down scarecrows to evade the boss. And as he finally got to my area of max railgunners at the back, it was time to start seeing some not really serious damage. This guy's just able to heal himself and spawn himself shield at any time he wants, so all of those rails that I invested in really couldn't do all that much to him. I have to start selling and rebuying my stuff to move it to the back, but this wasn't going to be enough to kill him, so I had a change of plan. I was going to build the strongest possible railgun defense at the very back of the map so that when he finally got there, we would hopefully one-shot him. And so I began working. My back defense that I had gotten was able to damage him enough to prevent him from healing all his HP back, and the railgunners were starting to stack up. By the way, I had to slow down my game to have enough time to do all of this because this is just ridiculous. But as Eradicator Mark II turned around one of the final bends, the damage kicked in. We were dealing tens of thousands of damage per second with all of these railgunners, and because they were so strong, Eradicator Mark II couldn't even do anything. And so he dies before he gets to the final bend. Well, that was tough. Is that as hard as the old expert mode? No. Is this more fun? Yeah, probably. Keep this up, John. And you, viewer, you better comment your opinion and then like, subscribe, and use star code E because this took forever. Goodbye.